You know, there's something about the open road that calls to us, isn't there? The promise of freedom, of escape, of leaving our troubles behind in the rearview mirror. But what happens when the road itself becomes the trap, when the very highways we trust to carry us to safety become the corridors of our worst nightmares? I've spent years collecting stories from people who've experienced things on America's highways that defy explanation, things that change them forever. And tonight, I want to share 3 of these encounters with you. 3 true stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the roads you travel every day. These aren't just ghost stories or urban legends. These are testimonies from real people who stumbled upon something dark and ancient that lurks just beyond the yellow lines and guardrails. Something that's been waiting patiently for the right moment, the right person, to reveal itself. The question I want you to ask yourself as we journey through these tales is this: how well do you really know the highways you drive? Because after tonight, you might find yourself taking a different route home. Before we begin this unsettling journey together, I need your help. If these stories affect you the way they've affected me, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these true encounters. Subscribe to Dr. Bonechill to help us reach 10,000 subscribers, because the more we grow, the more stories I can share with you. And please, comment below with your own experiences or thoughts. Sometimes the most chilling truths come from the community we build together. Now, let me tell you about the first encounter. A story that proves sometimes the most dangerous thing on the highway isn't what you can see. Come in. Story 1. The Hitchhiker's Dikembe name is David, and I need to tell you about something that happened to me 3 years ago on Interstate 40, somewhere between Amarillo and Oklahoma City. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world, about death, and about the thin line between helping a stranger and inviting evil into your life. I was driving home from a business conference in Texas, one of those mind-numbing corporate events where middle management pretends to care about synergy while secretly checking their phones under the table. It was late October, and the sun was setting earlier each day, painting the endless plains in shades of amber and blood orange that should have been beautiful, but somehow felt ominous. I'd been driving for about 4 hours when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the highway, thumb extended in that universal gesture of the desperate. Even from a distance, I could see she was young, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair that whipped around her face in the prairie wind. She wore a white sundress that seemed completely inadequate for the dropping temperature, and she had no luggage, no purse, nothing but what looked like a small object clutched in her left hand. Now, I want you to understand something about me. I'm not the kind of person who picks up hitchhikers. I've got a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, and a healthy respect for the evening news. But there was something about this girl that made me slow down. Maybe it was the way she stood so perfectly still, not frantically waving or jumping around like most people trying to catch a ride. She just stood there, patient as a statue, as if she knew I would stop. And God help me, I did. I pulled over about 50 yards past her, watching in my rearview mirror as she walked toward my car. Her steps were deliberate, almost gliding, and she never once looked away from my eyes in the mirror. When she reached the passenger door, she paused for a moment, and I swear I felt the temperature in the car drop by 10 degrees. "Thank you," she said as she slid into the seat beside me. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was something underneath it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "I've been waiting for someone like you." I asked her where she was headed, trying to keep my voice casual, but she just smiled and said, "Wherever you're going is fine. I just need to get away from here." She held up the object in her left hand, a small, ornate compass that looked like it had been crafted from black metal and bone. "This will help us find the way." I should have stopped right there, should have asked her to get out, should have driven away and called the police. But something about that compass held my attention. The needle wasn't pointing north, it was spinning slowly, deliberately, as if it were searching for something specific. "That's an interesting compass," I said, pulling back onto the highway. "Looks old. It belonged to my grandfather," she replied, her thumb tracing the edge of the device. "He was a truck driver for 40 years. Drove these roads when they were just dirt piles and promises. He always said this compass never led him astray, never took him anywhere he wasn't supposed to go." The needle suddenly stopped spinning and pointed directly ahead, down the highway. The girl, I realized I'd never asked her name, smiled and settled back into her seat. "We're on the right path now," she whispered. "For the next hour, We drove in relative silence. I tried making conversation, but she seemed more interested in watching the landscape roll by and occasionally checking her compass. The sun had set completely, leaving us in that deep darkness that only exists in the middle of nowhere, where the nearest town is 50 miles away and the only light comes from your headlights, carving a tunnel through the night. That's when I started noticing. The changes died first. It was the radio. I'd been listening to classic rock out of Oklahoma City, but gradually the music began to fade, replaced by static and something else, something that sounded almost like whispers. I reached over to adjust the tuning, but the girl's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Leave it," she said. "They're trying to tell us something." I pulled my hand back, disturbed by how cold her fingers were. "Who's trying to tell us something?" But she just smiled and held up the compass again. The needle was now pointing slightly to the right, toward an exit that was coming up in about 2 miles. "Take the next exit," she said. I shook my head. "That's not the way I'm going. I need to stay on 40. The compass knows better," she insisted. "Trust it. Trust me." And here's the thing that still haunts me. I wanted to trust her, despite every rational thought screaming at me to keep driving straight. Despite the growing sense that something was very wrong with this situation, I found myself slowing down and taking the exit. The off-ramp led to a narrow 2-lane road that seemed to disappear into absolute darkness. There were no streetlights, no businesses, no signs of civilization at all. Just an empty ribbon of asphalt stretching into the void. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "To where it all began," she said, and when I looked at her, I saw that her eyes had changed. They were darker now, deeper, like looking into wells that had no bottom. My grandfather didn't just drive these roads, David. He built them. He and others like him, working with forces that predated the highways, predated the towns, predated everything except the hunger. I wanted to stop the car, wanted to turn around, but my hands seemed to have a will of their own. They kept the steering wheel steady, kept us moving forward into the darkness. "You see, David," she continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. "The roads need feeding. They need souls to keep them strong, to keep them connected to the old powers that run beneath the earth like veins of shadow and need." My grandfather understood this. He made a bargain. The compass in her hand began to glow with a sickly green light, and I realized that what I had taken for bone inlay was actually bone, real bone, yellowed with age and worn smooth by countless fingers. Every few years, he would pick up a hitchhiker, she said, someone traveling alone, someone who wouldn't be missed right away. He would take them to the feeding places, the spots where the road's hunger was strongest. And in return, the roads protected him, guided him, kept him safe for 40 years. My foot found the brake pedal, and I pressed down hard, sending us skidding to a stop in the middle of the empty road. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking. "Get out of my car right now." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bones. "Oh, David, you still don't understand. I'm not the one who needs to get out." That's when I saw them in the headlights, dozens of figures standing in the road ahead of us. They were translucent, like heat mirages, but I could make out their shapes. Clearly enough, men and women in clothes from different eras, all holding compasses identical to the one in the girl's hand, all staring at us with eyes that held no light, no life, no hope. My grandfather's other passengers, she explained, they're still here, still traveling the roads, still serving the hunger. "And now you're going to join them." I threw the car in reverse, but the engine died. I tried to restart it, but the key just clicked uselessly in the ignition. The radio static grew louder, and I could hear the whispers clearly now, voices pleading, warning, crying out in languages I didn't recognize. "Why?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Why me?" She reached over and touched my face with her impossibly cold fingers. "Because you stopped, David. Because you saw someone in need and you couldn't drive by. Because you have a good heart, and good hearts make the best fuel for the roads." The compass in her hand pulsed brighter, and I felt something inside me begin to pull loose, something essential, something that made me who I was. The figures in the road began to move closer, and I could see their faces now, slack and empty, their eyes reflecting the compass's green glow. But then something unexpected happened. The compass began to crack. A thin line appeared across its face, and then another. The girl looked down at it in confusion, then back at me with something that might have been fear, "That's impossible," she whispered. The cracks spread, and through them leaked a different kind of light, warm, golden, alive. The figures in the road began to writhe and dissolve, their forms becoming smoke that the wind carried away into the darkness. The whispers on the radio faded, replaced by the distant sound of music, real music, from a real station. "What's happening?" she demanded, but her voice was changing, becoming younger, more frightened, more human. "I don't know," I said, and I didn't. But I had a theory. Maybe the compass doesn't just choose victims. Maybe it chooses people who are capable of breaking the cycle. The compass cracked completely in half, and the girl, because that's what she was now, just a scared young woman in a white dress, collapsed against the passenger door, gasping. "I remember now," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I remember getting in the car with my grandfather. I remember him taking me to the feeding place. I remember the hunger taking me, but I also remember fighting it, trying to warn the others, trying to break free." The car's engine suddenly roared to life, and the headlights illuminated an empty road ahead of us. The figures were gone. The oppressive darkness was lifting, and in the distance, I could see the glow of the interstate. "How long?" she asked. "How long what? How long have I been dead?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw that she was already beginning to fade around the edges. "I don't know, but I think you're free now." She smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like what she should have been, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, instead of a victim of something ancient and hungry. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for being strong enough to break it." By the time I reached the interstate, she was gone. The only evidence she'd ever been there were the two halves of the compass, lying on the passenger seat, cold and lifeless as ordinary bone and metal. I drove home that night, but I didn't sleep for a week. I kept thinking about what she'd said, about the roads needing feeding, about the hunger that runs beneath the asphalt like veins of shadow. And I kept wondering, how many other compasses are out there? How many other grandfathers made bargains with things that should have been left sleeping? I still have the broken compass. I keep it in my desk drawer at home, wrapped in an old towel. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear it trying to pull itself back together. The two halves scraping against each other with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. My wife asks me why I don't take the interstate anymore, why I stick to surface streets and familiar routes. I tell her it's because I enjoy the scenery, but the truth is simpler and more terrifying. The roads remember, and sometimes when the moon is dark and the highways are empty, they're still hungry. I haven't seen any more hitchhikers since that night, but I know they're out there, standing by the side of the road, holding their compasses, waiting for the next good heart to stop and offer help. And the worst part, I know that if I saw someone in need, someone standing alone in the darkness, I'd probably stop again. Story 2. The rearview mirror me name is Marcus, and I need to tell you about the worst purchase I ever made. It was a rearview mirror I bought at a truck stop outside Bakersfield, California, and it cost me everything I thought I knew about the nature of time, death, and the roads that connect us all. I was a long-haul trucker for 15 years, running routes from Los Angeles to Chicago and back again. It was a good life. If you could handle the solitude and the endless miles of asphalt stretching out before you like a black river flowing toward tomorrow, I'd see my share of strange things on the highways, lights that followed you for miles, voices on the CB radio that shouldn't have been there, exits that led to towns that didn't exist on any map. But I'd always rationalize them away, blame them on too much coffee and a little sleep. That changed on a Tuesday in September. I was pulling a load of electronics eastbound on Interstate 40, making good time despite the early autumn heat that shimmered up from the pavement like ghostly dancers. My rearview mirror had been loose for weeks, vibrating with every bump and pothole, and that morning it had finally given up completely, falling to the floor of the cab with a crash that sounded like breaking promises. I pulled into a truck stop called Crossroads Travel Plaza, one of those places that cater to drivers who've been on the road too long and need more than just fuel and coffee. The parking lot was packed with semis, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, and the air smelled of diesel fumes and possibility. Inside, past the usual selection of energy drinks and truck stop burritos, I found what I was looking for. The accessories section was small, but well-stocked, and sitting on a shelf between a chrome mud flap girl and a dream catcher made in China was the most beautiful rearview mirror I'd ever seen. It was clearly handmade, crafted from what looked like polished obsidian and silver. with intricate engravings around the frame that seemed to shift and change depending on how you looked at them. The mirror itself was perfectly clear, clearer than any glass I'd ever seen, and when I held it up to the light, it seemed to capture and hold the illumination like it was something precious. "That's a special one," said a voice behind me. I turned to see an old man in coveralls, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind. He looked like he'd been part of the truck stop since the day it was built, maybe longer. "How much?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, his eyes sharp and knowing. "For you, $50. But I have to warn you, that mirror has a history. It was crafted by a man named Samuel Thorne. Back in the 1960s, he was a trucker like you, but he had a gift for working with metal and glass, made that mirror for his own rig. But something went wrong. Something got trapped inside it." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to add some mystique to justify the price. "What kind of something?" "The past," he said simply. "All the things that happened on the roads before. All the accidents, all the deaths, all the moments when time stood still and the universe held its breath. Samuel thought he could contain it, control it, use it to see what was coming. But the past has a way of bleeding through, despite his warning, or maybe because of it. I bought the mirror. There was something about it that called to me, something that made me feel like I was meant to find it. I installed it in my rig within 10 minutes, adjusting it until I had a perfect view of the highway behind me. That's when I saw him for the first time. He was walking along the shoulder of the highway, maybe 200 yards back, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged in the 1950s. Even at that distance, I could see he was limping, favoring his left leg, and there was something dark spreading across his white shirt. Blood, I realized. Fresh blood. I pulled over immediately, grabbed my first aid kit, and ran back to help him. But when I reached the spot where I'd seen him, there was nothing. No man, no blood, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Just the empty highway, and the sound of wind through the guardrails. I told myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the heat and the long hours on the road. But when I got back to my truck and looked in the new mirror, he was there again, closer now, maybe 100 yards back, still walking, still bleeding, still wearing that expression of desperate confusion that I would come to know so well. Over the next few days, I saw him constantly. Every time I glanced in the mirror, he was there, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always walking, always bleeding, always trapped in what I was beginning to understand was his final moments. And he wasn't alone. There was a woman in a blue dress who appeared to be running from something I couldn't see. A teenage boy who kept looking over his shoulder with pure terror in his eyes. An elderly man who walked with a cane and seemed to be calling out to someone who would never answer. All of them were on the highway behind me. All of them were dead, and all of them were trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. The mirror was showing me the ghosts of the road, the spirits of everyone who had died on these highways over the decades. And with each passing day, I could see them more clearly, hear their voices more distinctly, feel their desperation more acutely. The man in the 1950s suit was named Robert Henley. He'd been driving home from a business meeting in 1962 when a drunk driver crossed the center line and hit him head-on. He'd survived the initial impact, but had crawled out of his car and tried to walk for help, bleeding internally, dying with each step. He'd been walking that same stretch of highway for over 60 years, replaying his final moments, waiting for someone to help him. The woman in the blue dress was Sarah Martinez. She'd been running from her abusive husband in 1978 when her car broke down. She'd started walking, hoping to reach a phone, but her husband had found her. The police report said it was a murder-suicide, but Sarah's ghost was still running, still trying to escape, still believing that if she could just make it to the next town, she would be safe. The teenage boy was Tommy Walsh. He'd been at a party in 1985 when someone had slipped something in his drink. He panicked, tried to drive home, and crashed into a bridge support. He died instantly, but his spirit was still behind the wheel, still trying to navigate roads that no longer existed, still trying to get home to parents who had died decades ago. They all had stories, they all had reasons for being trapped, and they all seemed to know that I could see them die at first. I thought I was going insane. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, started popping caffeine pills like candy just to stay awake because the dreams were worse than the visions. In my dreams, I was walking beside them, part of their endless parade of the dead, and I could feel the weight of their collective despair pressing down on me like a physical thing. But then I started to notice something else. The mirror wasn't just showing me the dead, it was showing me the future dead, too. I saw a red sedan about to blow a tire at 70 miles per hour. I saw a motorcycle rider who was going to hit a patch of oil and lose control. I saw a family in a minivan who were about to be hit by a truck driver who had fallen asleep at the wheel. And I realized I could prevent it. I started using my CB radio to warn other drivers. Breaker, breaker, red sedan in the right lane. You've got a blowout coming in about 2 miles. Better pull over and check your tires. Motorcycle in the left lane. There's oil on the road ahead. Take it easy. Family in the blue minivan. There's a sleepy driver in the truck behind you. Better let him pass. Most of the time, they listen. Most of the time, I was able to prevent the accidents I saw coming. But not always. The mirror showed me Sarah Martinez's death 3 days before it happened. I saw her walking along the highway, running from something I couldn't see, and I knew that if I didn't intervene, she would die exactly as she had 45 years ago. It was a loop, a cycle, and somehow I was being given the chance to break it. I waited at the spot where she would appear, parked on the shoulder with my hazard lights flashing. When she materialized out of the darkness, looking exactly as she had in the mirror, I was ready. Sarah, I called out. Sarah Martinez, I know who you are. I know what happened to you. You don't have to keep running. She stopped, turned, and looked at me with eyes that held 45 years of terror and confusion. How do you know my name? Because I've been watching you, I said. I've been watching all of you, and I think I know how to set you free. That night, I helped Sarah understand that she was dead, that her husband was dead, that the danger she was running from no longer existed. I helped her remember not just her death, but her life, her children, her dreams, her hope for a better future. And as the sun rose, I watched her fade away, not in fear, but in peace. One by one, I helped them all. Robert Henley, the man in the 1950s suit, finally stopped walking when I convinced him that help had come, that he could rest now. Tommy Walsh stopped driving when I showed him that his parents were waiting for him on the other side. Each time I helped one of them move on, the mirror became a little clearer, a little less crowded with the dead, but the process was killing me. Each ghost I helped took something from me, a piece of my life force, a fragment of my soul, a portion of my remaining time. I could feel myself getting weaker, older, more translucent. I was becoming like them, caught between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The old man at the truck stop had been right. The mirror was a trap, but not for the ghosts. It was a trap for the living, for people like me who couldn't ignore suffering when they saw it. Samuel Thorne had probably started the same way, trying to help the dead find peace, not realizing that each act of kindness was binding him closer to their realm. By the time I understood what was happening, it was too late to stop. I'd helped hundreds of souls cross over, and in doing so, I crossed over myself. Not completely, not yet, but enough that I could feel the pull of the highway, the call of the endless road that all ghosts eventually walk. I'm still driving, still using the mirror to help the dead find peace, but I know my time is running out. I can see myself in the mirror now, fading around the edges, becoming more and more like the ghost I'm trying to save. Soon, I'll be just another spirit trapped on the highway, walking the same routes forever, waiting for someone with a special mirror to help me find my way home. The mirror is still in my truck, still showing me the past and the future, still offering me the chance to make a difference. And I'll keep using it until I can't anymore, because that's what the mirror chose me to do. That's what the roads need from drivers like me. Not just to transport goods from one place to another, but to help transport souls from this world to the next. If you're ever driving late at night and you see a semi pulled over on the shoulder, its driver talking to empty air, don't stop. Don't try to help. Just keep driving. Because some burdens are too heavy to share, and some mirrors reflect more than just the road behind you. They reflect the road ahead, and sometimes that road leads to places you're not ready to go. Story 3. The mile marker. Me name is James, and I need to tell you about the last road trip I ever took. It was supposed to be a simple drive from Denver to Salt Lake City, a journey I'd made dozens of times before, but somewhere between mile marker 247 and mile marker 148 on Interstate 80, I found something that wasn't supposed to exist. Something that made me understand that our highways aren't just roads. They're scars across the landscape, and sometimes those scars bleed. I was driving alone, which was nothing unusual for me. I'd been divorced for 2 years, and my kids lived with their mother in Utah. The monthly custody visits had become a ritual of awkward conversations and forced smiles. But I kept making the drive because they were all I had left that mattered. It was late November, and the weather was turning ugly. Snow had been threatening all day, and by the time I reached the Wyoming border, the first flakes were starting to fall. I should have stopped, should have found a motel, and waited for the storm to pass. But I was anxious to see my kids and foolishly confident in my ability to handle winter driving. That's when I saw the mile marker. It was standing about 20 feet off the highway, partially hidden by a cluster of sagebrush and covered in what looked like decades of rust and weathering. But what caught my attention wasn't its condition. It was the number painted on it in faded white numerals, 247.5. I'd driven this stretch of highway countless times, and I'd never seen a half-mile marker before. In 15 years of making this trip, I'd never noticed anything between mile marker 147 and mile marker 148, but there it was, standing in the gathering darkness like a monument to something I couldn't understand. I pulled over without really thinking about it, drawn by a curiosity that felt almost compulsive. The snow was falling harder now, and the wind was picking up, but I found myself walking toward the marker despite the weather. As I got closer, I could see that it wasn't just weathered. It was older than the highway itself. The metal was pitted and scarred, and the paint was so faded it was almost invisible. But at the base of the marker, half buried in the sandy soil, was something that made my blood run cold. It was a small metal plate, about the size of a license plate, with words etched into its surface in a script that looked like it had been carved by hand. The letters were filled with something dark, not paint, but something organic, something that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Property of the Lost Mile Consortium, it read, established 1847, authorized personnel only. That was 30 years before the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, decades before the first automobiles, generations before the interstate highway system was even conceived. Yet here was a mile marker that claimed to predate all of it. I should have left then, should have gotten back in my car and continued my journey. But something about the marker held me, drew me closer, made me want to understand what I was looking at, and that's when I noticed the path. It was barely visible in the gathering snow, just a slight depression in the ground that led away from the marker toward what looked like a gap in the distant hills, a path that seemed to beckon, to promise answers to questions I didn't even know I was asking. I followed it. The path led me away from the highway, away from the familiar sounds of traffic and civilization, into a landscape that seemed untouched by time. The snow fell more heavily here, but it didn't seem to accumulate on the ground. Instead, it disappeared the moment it touched the earth, as if the very soil was hungry for it. After about a quarter mile, the path ended at what appeared to be another highway. But this road was different. The asphalt was black, not the dark gray of normal pavement, but a deep, absolute black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The yellow lines were painted in a color that hurt to look at directly, and the road itself stretched off into the distance in both directions, disappearing into darkness that no amount of snow could illuminate. Standing at the edge of this impossible highway was a man in a uniform I didn't recognize. He was tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow in the dim light, and his eyes were the color of old ice. When he saw me, he smiled, and his teeth were to white, to sharp, to numerous. "Welcome to the Lost Mile," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind. "I'm Controller Harrison. We've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh yes, James. We've been watching you for years. Every time you make this drive, every time you pass our marker, we take note. You're very punctual, very reliable. Those are qualities we value in our drivers." I looked around, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "What is this place?" "This is the road that connects all roads," Harrison explained. "The highway that exists between the highways. When the government built the interstate system, they thought they were creating something new, something modern, but they were really just laying asphalt over paths that have existed for centuries, roads that were walked by people who understood the true nature of travel." He gestured toward the black highway. "This is the Lost Mile, James. The stretch of road that exists in the spaces between the official mile markers. It's where the real business of the highways gets done." "What kind of business?" "The transportation of souls," he said simply, the movement of things that can't be moved by conventional means, the delivery of cargo that doesn't appear on any manifest. That's when I saw them, the vehicles. They were emerging from the darkness at both ends of the highway, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Cars and trucks from every era, from Model T Fords to modern semis, all driving in perfect formation on the black asphalt. But there was something wrong with them, something that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on them directly. The vehicles were translucent, ghostly, and their drivers were empty silhouettes, shadow people who gripped steering, wheels with hands that weren't quite there. Every vehicle that has ever been in an accident on the interstate system ends up here eventually. Harrison explained, every driver who has ever died on the highways becomes one of our employees. They drive the lost mile, transporting the things that fall through the cracks of the living world. I watched in horror as the ghostly convoy passed by, their headlights casting no light, their engines making no sound. What things? Lost memories, forgotten dreams, the final thoughts of the dying, the last words that were never spoken, all the intangible cargo that gets left behind when someone dies on the road. One of the vehicles, a semi-truck that looked like it had been built in the 1960s, pulled over and stopped near us. The driver's door opened, and a figure climbed out. It was a man in coveralls, his face obscured by shadow, but I could see the outline of his features, the suggestion of eyes that had seen too much. This is driver 347, Harrison said. He's been with us since 1962. Hit a drunk driver near Bakersfield, California. Been making runs on the Lost Mile ever since. The shadowy figure nodded at me, and I realized with a chill that I could see through him to the truck behind. He was more ghost than man, more memory than substance. We have an opening, Harrison continued, a position that would be perfect for someone with your experience, your reliability, your dedication to making the journey no matter what the weather. I don't understand. You will, he said, soon, very soon. That's when I felt it, a tugging sensation in my chest, as if something essential was being pulled loose from inside me. I looked down and saw that my hands were beginning to fade, becoming translucent like the ghost drivers. What's happening to me? You're joining the fleet, Harrison explained. You see, James, you've been dead for about 10 minutes now. Your car hit a patch of ice near mile marker 147, skidded off the highway, and rolled down an embankment. You're probably still trapped in the wreckage, bleeding out in the snow while the storm covers your tracks. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The mile marker, the path, the lost mile. It was all a recruitment process, a way for the highway to claim new drivers for its ghostly fleet. But I have children. I protested. I have a life. I was going to see them, and now you'll be able to see them whenever they drive on the interstate, Harrison said. You'll be able to watch over them, protect them, guide them. Isn't that what every father wants? The tugging sensation grew stronger, and I could feel myself becoming lighter, less substantial. My connection to the living world was severing, strand by strand, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. What do you want from me? The same thing we want from all our drivers, Harrison replied. To transport the cargo that can't be transported any other way. To help the dead move on to wherever they're supposed to go. To serve the roads that have served humanity for so long. I looked at the ghostly convoy, at the shadow drivers who had once been living people with families and dreams and plans for the future. Was this really what I was becoming? A phantom trucker hauling spiritual cargo along a highway that existed between the spaces of reality. There's dignity in the work, Harrison assured me, as if reading my thoughts, purpose, meaning. You'll be helping souls find their way to the next world, just as you helped your living passengers find their way to their destinations. The transformation was almost complete now. I could barely see my own hands, and my voice sounded hollow and distant when I spoke. Will I remember? Will I remember my children, my life? For a while, Harrison said, but eventually the memories fade. The living world becomes a dream, and the lost mile becomes your only reality. It's better that way. Trust me, I wanted to fight it, wanted to resist the pull of the highway and find my way back to the living world. But I could feel my physical body dying somewhere in the snow, feel my last breath leaving my lungs, feel my heart beating its final rhythm. Your truck is waiting, Harrison said, gesturing toward a vehicle that was materializing out of the darkness. It was a big rig, sleek and black, with Lost Mile Express painted on the side in that same painful yellow color as the road lines. I walked toward it, my feet no longer making sounds on the asphalt. The door opened at my approach, and I climbed into the cab. The interior was familiar yet strange, all the controls I was used to, but made of materials that didn't exist in the living world. Switches and dials that controlled functions I couldn't name. "Welcome to the fleet, driver 612. Harrison said through the open window. "Your first assignment is waiting for you at loading bay 7. A shipment of final farewells that need to be delivered to the westbound Afterlife terminal." I started the engine, and it roared to life with a sound like distant thunder. The cargo bay was already loaded. I could feel the weight of it, the emotional gravity of hundreds of last words and dying wishes as I pulled onto the Lost Mile. Joining the endless convoy of ghost vehicles, I caught a glimpse of something in my side mirror. It was my car, twisted and broken at the bottom of an embankment, already being covered by snow. And inside, barely visible through the shattered windshield, was my own body, still and silent and finally at peace. My children would wonder what happened to me. They would wait for me to arrive for our visit, and when I didn't show up, they would call the police. Eventually, someone would find the wreckage and they would have their answer. But they would never know about the Lost Mile, about the highway that runs between the highways, about the ghostly fleet that carries the cargo of the dead. They would never know that their father had become a driver on the road that connects all roads, transporting the final thoughts and last words of the dying to wherever such things need to go. I've been making runs on the Lost Mile for, well, time doesn't work the same way here. It could be days, it could be decades. I've hauled shipments of childhood memories to the terminal of forgotten dreams. I've delivered cargoes of unfinished business to the depot of eternal regrets. I've transported the final prayers of the dying to destinations that exist beyond the edge of human understanding. And sometimes, when I'm driving the regular highways during my off-duty hours, I see the living. I see parents driving to visit their children, couples heading home from date nights, families embarking on vacations. I see all the life and love and hope that flows along the arteries of America's highway system. I watch over them when I can. I try to guide them away from the accidents I know are coming, the patches of ice that claim lives, the drunk drivers who cross center lines. I can't always save them, but I try, because that's what drivers do. We look out for each other on the road, but I also watch for the recruiters, the mile markers that shouldn't exist, the paths that lead away from the highway, the controllers who smile with too many teeth and make offers that sounded good to refuse. If you're ever driving late at night, you see a mile marker with a decimal point, don't stop. If you notice a path leading away from the highway toward distant lights, don't follow it. And if you ever meet a man in a uniform who claims to have been expecting you, turn around and run. Because the Lost Mile is always looking for new drivers, and the highways are always hungry for souls to feed their endless appetite for movement and transportation and the eternal journey from one place to another. The roads remember everything, and they never forget a debt. Conclusion: these 3 stories have haunted me for years, shared with me by people who lived through experiences that changed them forever. David, who learned that helping strangers can lead to encounters with forces beyond human understanding. Marcus, who discovered that seeing the truth can trap you between worlds. And James, who found out that some journeys never really end. What connects these tales isn't just the highway setting or the cursed objects. It's the revelation that our roads are more than simple transportation routes. They're conduits for ancient powers, pathways between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and sometimes they demand payment for safe passage. The next time you're driving alone at night, pay attention to what you see in your mirrors. Notice the mile markers, the exits that seem unfamiliar, the hitchhikers who stand as still in the darkness, because the highways remember everything, and they're always watching for the next soul to join their eternal convoy. If these stories have affected you the way they've affected me, I hope you'll hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Subscribe to Dr. Bonechill for more true encounters with the supernatural. We're so close to reaching 10,000 subscribers, and your support helps me share these important stories with the world. Remember, the roads are always listening. Drive safely and never stop for strangers who offer you gifts that seem too good to be true. Because sometimes the price of a helping hand is higher than you ever imagined.